everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Talking Disney. This episode 21, where we talk about one of the movies and the animated classics in the Disney canon of animated films from Walt Disney Animated Studios. Occasionally, we'll have another Disney property that we might do, such as Mary Poppins or the Toy Story movies. But for the most part, every month, we're talking about one of these animated classics. And we do not go in chronological order. We let the random number generator select what we're going to talk about.
It's the claw of our podcast.
Yes,
Right?
Except for this month, we decided to talk about The Lion King because of the photorealistic animated film that is coming out this month. So we're talking about the 32nd animated classic from Walt Disney Animated Studios, The Lion King. And there's a lot of different stuff that we can talk about. And it's kind of interesting because we talked about Beauty and the Beast already. And then we talked about Pocahontas on a previous episode. And what's interesting is that Pocahontas was considered the prestige film. It was the main studio. It had your Alan Menken music. It had your big names coming onto that project. And this Lion King project was I sort of joke that it was the Bad News Bears, of the team. You had Elton John doing the music, like as random, and it was just this animal movie. Yeah. And I think even with the animators, it was kind of seen as sort of second help beings, kind of scraps, kind of a feel. And so what's amazing is that out of that is the one that would become this animated treasure and one of the most successful animated films ever, yes, the juggernaut released. So it's one of those really interesting things to happen. And so do you remember seeing The Lion King in the theaters?
Oh, absolutely, Rachel. I was at the Villa Theater in Salt Lake City. And I know we've talked about the Villa before. It's just was one of the great local movie palaces, which sadly is no longer. The building's still there, but it's a carpet store, like a Persian rugs store. I haven't even had the heart to go in there. I kind of want to go into the showroom, but anyway, I digress. But yes, I distinctly remember it, and it just I was really quite blown away by it. I thought it was terrific, and then that summer it was nonstop. I mean, it just got momentum, and it just became really just the giant kind of unexpected hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, part of it is they did such a good job marketing it.
Yes.
With this trailer
that trailer that played in front of Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that too. That trailer. And it was amazing because basically the trailer, it was the opening sequence of the film, the Circle of Life sequence.
Yeah, it was the first 4 minutes of the film, which is very unique. I mean, and we'll talk about it, but that first 4 minutes does such a great job of drawing you in. It really is similar to, it's really in the conversation for one of the great opening numbers, I guess, of a film ever.
And what was so interesting about it too is that, I don't know, I can't remember the details, and maybe you got them, Rachel, but I think the film was going to be delayed because they were trying to do this cadence where they would have one full-length animated feature released one every year.
Yeah.
And there was going to be a delay because, Aladdin came out in holiday season of 1992. And then The Lion King wasn't scheduled to come out until the summer of 94. But still, they put those first 4 minutes, 18 months before the film was supposed to, before the film was supposed to be released. And it was so cool. It was just like, I couldn't get enough of it. I remember every time I saw it, it's like, wow, can we watch that again?
Yeah, there's lots of really interesting things about this because they released those first 4 minutes when only a third of the movie had been completed.
Yeah.
And it was such a great hook that that producer Don Hahn, that he said that he was afraid of not living up to the expectations raised by the preview.
Mm-hmm.
So, that definitely was something that they were aware of, and that, it took 6 years to execute, which is longer than Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast had taken 2 years. So this took a lot longer. They went through a ton of different animators, writers. If you look at the writer list for The Lion King, I feel like over there at Disney, like everyone is like, oh, I got, once it became a big hit, it was like, I got writing credit on I was a writer for The Lion King. Because it's literally just the story. There's 3 screenwriters. But then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 credited story writers.
Wow.
On The Lion King.
Yeah.
And you can bet they floated around that in their resume for.
I know, right? Yeah.
And evidently, because this was all done in the Florida office studio that they had at the time, which was again kind of the, it wasn't the prestige animation studio of Walt Disney in yeah, exactly. And so, it's interesting. It's also the first and maybe only animated film from Disney that has no humans at all.
Right.
Like not even
all animals.
Yeah, because even, in Bambi, you have the hunters that are implied in kind of thing. I mean, I guess if you count Zootopia. But
Zootopia is probably, like the next one where it's just only animals and no humans are in this world.
Yeah, I don't think anthropomorphic counts because I guess technically you could count Robin Hood.
Yeah, that's true because then there's Robin Hood. You're right. This one, because they're not anthropomorphic. They're in their own kind of natural setting, and if man is involved, he's not in the movie at all.
And they went out to Kenya, to get their inspiration for
their research trip.
Yeah. And for the character designs, I feel like this movie was one of the first animated films to really, really puff up the celebrity voice cast. I mean, obviously it had been done, but this was just every role was somebody, even having for a part that hardly had any lines at all.
Yeah.
You had someone like Whoopi Goldberg as Hyena. You had, this cast was very stacked.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It was an amazing cast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
And they also didn't seem to care if they had they cast singers, so that almost every part has a separate singer doing songs.
Uh-huh.
Even someone like Matthew Broderick, which is surprising because he's such a Broadway guy now.
Yeah.
He had somebody singing his songs.
Yeah, it seems like Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella, who do Timon and Pumbaa, they, I think, are doing their own thing. But then, they're Broadway stars too. That's why how they got the gig. But it's and then also though too the songs. I mean, like with Circle of Life in particular, I guess that's one where there's just another person singing. Yeah, right? No one's particularly. No one's.
It's true. They have some background singers, background songs. Circle of Life, and Can You Feel the Love Tonight is Elton John singing, and then also a woman. I forget what's her name.
Well, Carmen. It's like Carmen Twilly or something. I'm not sure.
She actually when I last time was at D23, they had this amazing panel on The Lion King. And Carmen Twilly, you're right. She was there and she sang Circle of Life with a bunch of the Broadway cast people. And that was incredible. Cool. Yeah, that was incredible. Jeremy Irons, he sang most of Be Prepared.
Yeah.
Then Jim Cummings helped because he was sick, I think.
Oh,
Green
interesting.
Yarns, I believe. And then Rowan Atkinson did his own
Oh
singing.
yeah, did his own singing for that. I can't wait to
Mhm.
be king.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of interesting. You also had uh, we'll talk a little more about the music. We had Hans Zimmer doing the. A lot of people forget
Well,
that.
yeah, that Hans Zimmer does, and his score is so good. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that that really stood out to me again with this last viewing. You know,
So how do you feel about the whole Kimba the White Lion thing?
you know, I don't. So at the time when I remember reading about this, I wouldn't be surprised if they were influenced by it, but I don't think that they were just like outright stealing it. I think that maybe it was maybe it was a derivative sort of
Mhm.
thing or it's kind of an inspiration, but I didn't feel like it was necessarily that they were stealing it. Now I think about it, I think I still kind of feel the same way, Rachel. What do you think about it?
Uh-huh.
What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, so according to Roger Allers, he
Yeah,
says
who's one
that
of the co-directors of the
yes.
film?
So he says that he was completely unfamiliar with the movie, but that he did live in Tokyo, I think, for a time in the 1980s. And that I guess the animator Osamu Tezuka
Of Kimba.
uh, of Kimba had been considered sort of Japan's Walt Disney,
Yeah,
and that it was on TV a bunch, and that he might have seen it. And I mean, this was just what they say, that he might have seen it. It might have subliminally kind of
yeah.
influenced him. I mean, it does feel like Kimba, Simba. It was pretty close,
There's
but
a lot of similarities. I mean, there
mhm,
absolutely. I mean, like no question. No
yeah.
question.
And I've never seen it, but I've just
I've
heard
never
about
seen
it.
it either, but I just heard about it. I know it's been very controversial
Hmm.
all these years.
Now,
You know?
yeah, and Rob Minkoff, he said
Yeah, the co-director.
he claimed they did not pay hush money to the people in Japan. Anyway, so it goes back and forth. The way that I look at this is kind of the same way that I look at most of, say, Elvis's songs were not originally his songs. Most of them were previously sung by African American musicians or Hawaiian singers, or
Yeah,
different things like that. And then he went and he got all the glory.
yeah,
Something like Hound Dog was not originally Elvis's song. It was originally sung by African American blues singer. I don't know the name off the top of my head. And I think that it's a shame that I don't know that name, and that's a shame. But I don't necessarily think that that means that Elvis's song isn't technically a good song,
right.
right? Like both things can be true.
Yeah, right.
and uh and so yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. And so I don't know, it's an interesting sort of footnote to this
It
movie.
is. It is an interesting little thing. Like did they or didn't they, or who knows?
Yeah, we'll never fully know. But
Yeah,
anyway, if you're listening and you have thoughts about it, let us know in the comment section. One of the other things I think is really interesting about this movie is that is if you look into it, Elton John was really trying to come at this from a different perspective than the Menken Ashman period. He had seen a lot of sort of this Broadway influence to it, and he wanted to go into a different direction. He wanted to go into a sort of a pop
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
direction into it. And so Elton John, he said in an article that I found when I was writing my review that because Elton John was recruited by Tim Rice and they wanted to do something different than what had been done by the Ashman Menken crowd. And he says, let's do it for kids because it's just a great story. But most of Disney animated movies have a kind of Broadway score. And I said, let's not go for that. Let's go for a completely different feel and just write ultra pop songs kids would like. Then adults can go and see those movies and get just as much pleasure out of them. I mean, adults buy a lot of pop records And that's from a Billboard magazine interview from 1997. What do you think about that? The idea of kind of really focusing on kids and really kind of moving away from Broadway and bringing the sort of pop aesthetic to the music.
Well, I think the proof is in the pudding here, Rachel, because, talk about a monster hit, too, because not only was the film incredibly popular, so was that soundtrack. Everybody bought that soundtrack, and I had the CD of it and listened to it a lot because the thing that was so interesting about it is that not only did it have the tracks, the original soundtrack from the film, Elton John recorded 2, if not 3 songs that were his own. Just him singing on it too. And then it had some. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if it had all of the Hans Zimmer tracks on it as well. But anyway,
yeah,
it was really good, and I thought a really smart decision because it was different enough that people went for it. People liked it.
What's interesting is that they really do a good job of going for the hook, which is such a part of pop music.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That if you, in comparison to say Beauty and the Beast, where you have the opening song Belle, most people I'd say that have seen the movie maybe a couple times, maybe even just one time, can sing quite a few. The words get stuck and there's not really a hook in that song, right?
Yeah.
If you compare intros, if you compare Circle of Life versus Belle, it's pretty much just her talking like through there goes the baker with her tray like always. And I bet that most people could probably come up with a lot of the lyrics to that song. And the same old bread and rolls to sell every morning, just the same. And whereas Circle of Life, I've seen this movie so many times, and aside from the Circle of Life, I can't tell you any of the lyrics. It's a circle of life and it moves us all. What else? I don't even know.
That's fair.
Right?
I think
it's not a bad thing. It's just different.
No, it's different. Yeah, it's different because those Beauty and the Beast songs are so terrific, so integrated into the story.
Yeah,
the Lion King ones are too, but they're really poppy. They're super. It's just
all that's important is the hook. The hook is this is the circle of life.
Yeah,
and all we need to know about this opening sequence for The Lion King is this circle of life, and there's a baby that's being christened. That's animals. That's it. That's all we need to know.
Yeah,
and so
effective.
Yeah, it's really effective, and in getting us to, especially because you're talking about animals. And we're human beings. And so it takes an added, I think you almost need more of a hook to get us to feel the emotions of animals. It was actually quite brilliant, I think, choice for
sure. Yeah.
For this kind of animated film. And so that's some sort of interesting kind of backstory. And I also, I appreciate that, what Elton John is saying about really trying to make the movie for kids. And I was talking with, I did a little unpopular Disney opinion thing on Twitter the other day, which is that was a little risky. But somebody was saying, "Oh, Hakuna Matata is the worst song," and I'm like, "It's a song for children."
Yeah.
And when you're a little kid and they're singing about flatulence, like that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, kids think Hakuna Matata is so funny.
Right. They love it. One of my friends, I'll go ahead. Sorry, don't interrupt.
No, I think there's value in that, just making something that kids just love.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. One of my friends who I saw with, wasn't sure if we went, if we saw it together first or what, but anyway, it's if I just can't wait to be king. Anytime that song came on, it was like major groaning and eye rolling. It was like, oh, I hate this song. And it's not my favorite. And again, I think because it's for kids, but I love the animation of that sequence. I know we'll get there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So once we're finished with the Circle of Life sequence, then we get introduced right away to our villain.
To Scar. I know.
Scar.
First real, yeah. That's a very interesting. That cut is so interesting too. You know, puts up the title card and then you see that little mouse and there's Scar.
Yeah. And what I think of first when I see this conversation between Mufasa and Scar, I think the closest comparison is definitely the beginning of Sleeping Beauty. Like, first of all, both characters have obvious villain names with Maleficent and Scar.
Yeah.
And they both are just sort of dripping with disdain, I think.
Uh-huh.
And I love both, both of the vocal performances are brilliant. But yeah, what do you think of Scar as kind of as your villain?
I think Scar's a very good villain. I mean, instantly we know his name. We can see he's got a scar, and just how the character design. How he's a lot. His body shape is smaller than Mufasa's, and he's got the different color of mane. And so anyway, and then Jeremy Irons. I mean, holy smokes! Like, actually, he could have probably looked like any number of things. And with Jeremy Irons' vocal performance, it still would have worked. Yeah, but I think Scar is really a good villain. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is probably the most sociopathic villain in all of Disney. I mean, he has no remorse at all for anything that he does.
Yeah.
For anything he does to Simba, for anything he does. And some people are kind of critical of Simba for running away and never coming back, and why didn't he listen to his father? And I'm like, he was first of all a child, of all, and second of all, he was being manipulated by a master manipulator who made him feel like it was his fault.
Yeah.
And so I don't hold him accountable for that at all.
I don't either, because Simba, yeah, he was too young, and he trusted Scar. I mean, he was his uncle.
Yeah.
And we don't know, but it's not shown on screen. But we don't know what kind of information, Mufasa was giving him Simba about his uncle. We don't see any of that, but
that's true.
They might be waiting. Maybe their plan was to wait for a later when he was a little older. Say, oh, by the way, your Uncle Scar's a sociopath.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, a lot of people said, oh, it's just a remake of Hamlet. I feel like that's too strong. I think it has obviously elements of, in particular, a brother character, another character coming and taking the throne and then avenging that throne for the father. All of that element, of course, is there. And I guess you could mildly say the Nala is an Ophelia type, but not really. But there's also, I think, some biblical feel to this, with Moses and Ramses, kind of a little bit of a feel, that rivalry.
Absolutely. I think the same thing too, Rachel, because it seems like, to me, it's not necessarily a carbon copy of Hamlet. It just feels, though, somewhat Shakespearean or very classical in its telling, and the way, these two brothers, and then, I mean, I'm with you, and I'm with you. It totally could be something pulled out of the Bible.
Yeah, and so we also meet Zazu here.
Yes.
And he's, I forgot to write down what kind of bird he is. What kind of bird is that? It's a hornbill. Yeah, he's a hornbill.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And Rowan Atkinson. And I really think he's a funny.
Oh, he's perfect in this in this role, I think.
And I like him as a contrast to the young Simba in I Just Can't Wait to Be King. And like I said in this unpopular opinion thing, someone said that it's the most pointless song to ever exist. Somebody said this about I Just Can't Wait to Be King, And I disagree. Yes, it's very boy bandy. It feels like a boy band album, but you need to you need to clearly establish Simba's motivations, and that's what the song does. The song clearly sets up his character, so that way we first of all we get the scene in the elephant graveyard where he lets his father down, and that's a really important scene later on. But then also we kind of understand how big of a kind of a betrayal when he chooses to do nothing, it really is, from who he wanted to be as a child.
Yeah.
And so I will defend I Just Can't Wait to Be King, because I think it's fun. I enjoy it, but also I love the animation.
Yeah.
And the sequence is very geometric. It's really, really cool. And I don't know. I just think it's a necessary. I think it does a really good job of kind of establishing Simba as a character.
I think so too. I don't share my friend's view of it. Like that's where you run to the restroom when that scene comes on. And for a couple of reasons. First off, I thought it was a really smart artistic move to do that really kind of bold fantasy-like animation. Because I'm with you. I love the colors. I love the geometric render. Design of the animals and how they make the little jungle look really fanciful at the same time. It does. It's a combination of the conflict between Simba and Zazu. That they have this poor Zazu. He's what a horrible job to try to watch over this bratty kid. This kind of bratty, cocky kid. But I have to say that like this viewing too in particular, I mean, it hasn't bothered me for years, and it definitely didn't bother me with this one recent view. In fact, I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
Yeah.
I think it's fun. And and then we get the scene where Mufasa is talking to Simba and tells him, I'm only brave when I have to be.
Yeah.
And you see that he was afraid.
Yeah.
And we forgot to talk about, but you also have earlier Mufasa telling Simba, everything you see exists together in a delicate balance. As king, you need to understand that balance and respect all the creatures, from the crawling ant to the leaping antelope.
Yeah.
And so, that kind of, when that balance is destroyed later on, you understand why everything goes badly. There's no food, there's no all of that.
And that great in that scene too that you were just talking about, how he's talking, Mufasa's talking about how he's brave only when he has to be, is that he teaches Simba about, he gives that wonderful symbolism of the stars and how they represent the kings of the past and how they're always looking down on you. And that imagery, and that concept I love so much. I think that's one of the things that really worked so well for me in the film. I think it's in a way, I mean, again, it's a bit abstract, but it's comforting, to think that sure, maybe they're not a star, or something, but ancestors are people that you love that are no longer here, are looking down at you, and they're going to always be there for you. And I love that so much.
Yeah, and also he says, Mufasa talks about how the kings of the past are looking down upon him, and that comes very heavily into play later on.
Yeah.
See, a lot of this is just building up, and it's just some really sweet moments. So then, after we finish with Mufasa and Simba, we get to Be Prepared.
Yes.
So Scar
goes on Mussolini.
Yeah. And he's trying to rally the hyenas to come to his side, and you get this great song, Be Prepared. And watching it really reminded me of just how much I miss villain songs. We haven't had a villain song in so long. I mean, since Mother Knows Best, we haven't had a villain song, and
it's a really good
I guess
song.
Some people might consider Shiny, a villain song, but
it's a little different, isn't
it?
Yeah,
it's different. And I love this. I just love everything about it. I love the coloring. I love how it's just really kind of fluorescent green.
Yes, that fluorescent green and all that smoke or whatever, like, you know, the all the hot pots going off in that scene are so cool. I'm with you. In fact, it crossed my mind, and I hate to even bring it up, Rachel, but I was thinking, this was artistically, this was so well done. How in the world could a photorealistic CGI thing even come close to what this was? Particularly that sequence. It's gonna be interesting to see what they do with it.
Because originally they said, "Oh, we're not going to include Be Prepared."
Oh my gosh!
And so, but now we're going to. And I mean, I do not like the redesign of Scar, but I'm trying to go into it with an open mind.
Yeah,
and
we'll just have to see what they do.
But it's going to be weird to see realistic lions singing. That's just going to be. I wish they had just not even done any of the songs, but whatever. But I just love the way the song builds and builds and builds, and he's so manipulative, and then when you get the stormtroopers
when they're going all
it's great that we'll soon be connected to King who we all time adore.
Like
and
it's the Nazis or the fascists or whatever, I mean, it's
and he's just so slimy when he's like, of course, quid pro quo, you're expected. Like, I just love all of it. It's so good, good. It's actually my favorite villain song.
Oh, I hear you. It's a really good villain song, and and I think one of the reasons it's so good is because it's creepy.
It is. It really is.
It's creepy because here all the hyenas are going for it. And then I know I'm repeating myself, but again, when they're in formation and marching the way they do, it's just like, okay, now they've become, they're his evil minions, and it's gonna be bad. Bad things happen, under these circumstances.
Yeah, and it has a real sort of old-fashioned quality to it in some ways too. Like, it reminds me kind of on Bald Mountain, kind of the aesthetic. And a lot of the choices that. So it's actually kind of beautiful at the same time. It's creepy. It's weird.
Oh no, exactly.
Yeah.
It's really, really well done.
So then we find out that Scar has his plan, and he tricks Simba. Into going down into the ravine, and then of course we have the stampede of the wildebeest, and then we have this dramatic scene where Mufasa saves Simba, and then Scar he has a chance to save Mufasa, and Scar says, "Long live the king."
And he kills him.
Yeah, he kills him. Yeah. But he's so bad that he tells Simba, he says, "Run away, Simba. Run away and never come back."
It's one of those. Right before that is just one of the more heartbreaking scenes of any Disney film.
Yes.
Where Simba finds his dad's, dead body and is so scared and so sad,
And you got him crying. I mean,
it's hard. And, I remember at the time too, I think some parental groups were really mad about it and different things, like, how dare you, this is a Disney movie. What are you doing, doing this? But I think it's been a hallmark of Disney movies.
Yeah.
To kind of have some of these hard things like Bambi. I mean, I know that Bambi is the very extreme example, but it's still same thing, Bambi's not there with his mother's dead body, but clearly it's very clear what's happening.
I think you could go back to Snow White. I mean, falling, she's sitting there dead.
Scary. Yeah.
I mean, they've never shied away from emotion.
Yeah.
I mean, almost every single one that's not a package film has some kind of major like death and kind of thing to deal with. So that's silly. But the people that are kind of hard on Simba, I think it's just ridiculous. It's a child. He's a child.
Yeah.
He's a cub, I guess is the correct word for it. It's ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah. So he ends up going to the jungle. He ends up meeting Timon and Pumbaa, and they have a new way. They're going to teach him a new way to live. Yeah, and it's kind of, I said in my review that I thought it was a softer version of what is presented in Pleasure Island and Pinocchio.
Yeah.
It's
Not quite as sinister.
No.
either.
But it's the idea that you can live your life for what pleases you.
Yeah.
Just like the boys in the island were only concerned with having fun and in that case sinning, doing sinful things. But it's just the idea that and that's the whole Hakuna Matata philosophy.
Yeah.
It's a problem-free philosophy.
And they teach him how, that he can eat bugs instead of eating them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Since he's the top of the food chain. But yeah, I mean, I can see why people criticize that song, as we've already discussed, but it's fun for kids, and it also demonstrates the point of what they're trying, to teach Simba a different way to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It means no worries for the rest of your days. It's our problem-free philosophy.
Yeah.
I don't know why I always end up singing on these podcasts when you're the singer. And it transitions from Jonathan Taylor Thomas
to Matthew Broderick.
And I love that whole scene when they're walking over the bridge.
I do too.
And singing, and you see it more.
See him grow up. I like that a lot.
Yeah, with the big moon.
No, it's terrific. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
And again, so beautifully and artfully done.
Yeah, and Ernie Sabella and Nathan Lane, I guess, were in a Broadway show at the time.
Guys and Dolls, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And so they had to go to a studio in the late at night after they'd finished performing, and they would record.
That's how they'd record. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Their things they were saying at the D23 thing, and so I think it's fun. I like it, and I think it makes a real interesting scene coming up. Because then Nala finds them, and this is my main beef with the movie, is this whole section, because it frustrates me because they were trying so hard to make it kid friendly. The part where I think they went too far is by turning "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" into a joke.
Oh, I gotcha.
I don't know.
Right.
I can see what's happening, but they don't have a clue.
They started and ended where Timon and Pumbaa are mourning that they've lost their friend.
Our trio's down to 2.
Yeah, that a female has shown up, and their friendship is gone. Yeah,
it's not my favorite. I don't love it, but I have to say, almost every single instance in the 90s, whatever like love ballad would win the Oscar from a Disney film, I almost always liked the more sort of peppy, fun kind of song better than the ballad song. But yeah, that's just me.
I don't love necessarily the one they put in the movie. I think I'm a bit indifferent to how the Timon and Pumbaa part, just for me. But I love though Elton John's version, his ballad that I believe plays during the closing credits.
Yeah, that's when it is.
And also that was the big radio. That was like the first single off the album, that they put on the radio. And
because this was the era of the pop. Usually in the closing credits, you had Celine Dion,
right, and the great Whole New World, on the Aladdin soundtrack with People Bryson and Regina Bell and
Vanessa Williams.
Yeah, exactly.
And Pocahontas.
And I love that Elton John version so much. I really do. I still to this day just think, wow, what a great song. But yeah, I hear you. It'll be interesting again. I don't want to bring it up too much, Rachel, but Beyonce's going to be singing it, as we saw it in the little teasers that they put out for this photorealistic one. We'll see how that goes. I don't think Timon and Pumbaa are going to be involved this round.
It's going to be kind of weird to see. I mean, because they basically like get it on, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
in this during this whole sequence, and it's gonna be weird with realistic lions, but whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
But this is where he first gets confronted with this. Hakuna Matata is threatened, and she tells him, "You don't know what your coming back will mean to them, and mean to the people." And he's still convinced that he's responsible for his father's death, and he tries to explain Hakuna Matata, and she wants none of it.
Yeah.
And so that's where we get we had been introduced to Rafiki in the opening sequence, but that's when he comes into play. And I really love the whole sequence when he's talking to Simba. He hits him with the stick and he says, what was that for? And I mean, because Simba had said, oh, the past was in the past. And he says, what was that for? Rafiki says, it doesn't matter. It's in the past. And Simba says, yeah, but it still hurts. Oh, yes, the past can hurt. But from the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole great scene. Then I love when Simba remembers the words of his father in the saying that he would always be there for him and he would always look after him. And he says, you promised you'd always be there, but you're not. And that always gets me choked up.
Yeah, oh, me too. When Simba's finally confronting what he learned as a child to where he is today,
Yeah. Well, and it really rings true to me because I just know that feeling of just missing someone. And when a movie can kind of capture that, it always gets me emotional because it's just,
for sure.
It's hard, when we miss people. And I don't know. I love that whole scene. I think is really beautiful.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
Then you have Rafiki kind of chasing him and says, I know where your father is. And he looks down and he sees a reflection of himself. Simba does. And he says, that's not my father. That's just my reflection. Rafiki says, no, look harder.
Yeah.
Look hard. And then we get, you see, he lives in you.
Yeah.
And I love that moment. And I think in the new version, I think they are going to use the Broadway song. I hope so.
I hope so too.
Because that would make me very excited because I love that song.
I do too. Well, and speaking of, because the Lion King soundtrack was such a hit, they came out with another one called The Rhythm of the Pride Lands. And I don't know if you're familiar with that album, but that album was terrific. And a lot of that music got used incorporated into the Broadway play. And so I'm with you. I hope that some of that's going to get used in this photorealistic version too. But I love that He Lives in You song a lot.
Yeah, it's so love good. It.
Yeah.
That would almost win me over to the whole thing if they do that.
If they use that.
I love Shadowlands too.
Shadowlands, yes, please. I do too. I love it.
So good. Yeah. But I don't know. It's just such an emotional moment. He lives in you, and you see all this baggage he's been hiding. He's been hiding who he is. He's been so sad and so. Under the guise of being happy, he's been sad.
Yeah.
And lonely. That's when he sees his father's ghost, and Mufasa says, Simba, you have forgotten me. He says, no, how could I? You have forgotten who you are, and so have forgotten me. Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become. You must take your place in the circle of life. And then he decides to go back.
Who you are. Yeah.
Yeah. You've forgotten who you are, so you have forgotten me. And I'm not a parent, but I can imagine that feeling when a child seriously strays from, becomes incarcerated or becomes, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And parents feel... I think parents can probably relate to sort of this feeling a little bit of,
absolutely,
of what it would be like to have something like that happen. And I also love the way that he repeatedly says, "Don't leave me, don't leave me." And who can't relate to that? I've always loved, I forget the name, but one of my favorite things about Harry Potter is that whole mirror. I don't know if you know about it, but there's a mirror that you can look and see the desire of your heart.
Right.
And so Harry looks through it and he sees his parents and how hard it is him and then I think Dumbledore says, people have wasted away in front of it. And just how hard that would be to you miss them so much. And, to be like, I got to go live my life. You don't want them to go away.
Right.
And this is a silly example, but I thought they did such a good job on this. There was a version of Christmas Carol last year on Lifetime Channel. And what the creative take that they had on it, I thought, is that you had, this was with Toni Braxton in it, oddly enough, but the reason she had become bitter was not actually because of money. It was because her parents had died in this horrible car crash and she had never really gotten to say goodbye. And so what they do, instead of having 3 different spirits, each one it's always her mother, and then her father joins. And every time she has to say goodbye to her mother, it made me cry. Like, they did such a good job. And I think even if you, I don't know, like even if you had just seen them, just barely, like in this, I would still just bawl every time. Like if I don't know, I thought they really captured that.
They really captured that.
Yeah. There's a country song that it's if I could go to heaven for a day, I think it is, or it's all about if you could just go for a visit and just say hi to people, like who you would say and who you'd introduce and all that kind of stuff, and those themes just really get to me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think
it's one of the reasons why this film is so beloved.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the many, but there's just something about this concept, that I just think really speaks to the hearts of people.
Yeah. Because you really miss the people that have, gone on in the past, and it's an interesting thing. That Lifetime movie is called Every Day is Christmas.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But so there you go. You have him going back, and he gets there and he sees that everything is there's famine and everything is dilapidated and no
food, right? And everything's just completely trashed. The hyenas have wrecked the Pride Land.
Yeah, and I love Zazu and his guy. He starts singing, and
it's a small world.
Yeah. I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts standing in the sun. And you've even seen the hyenas are getting antsy. There's no food, all of that. And one of the things that I think is really weird is I've heard a criticism of why do if the past is the past, why do the other lions not accept Simba? And the thing that I would say, at least initially, why they don't, the thing that I would say about that is I would say, first of all, they're being told a lie about him that Simba is, in fact, confirming at the beginning. He says, he basically agrees with Scar.
Yeah.
That's what he did. And, but then also, like, they have been living under this regime. The last thing that they're going to do is go against this regime. And I mean, because that's really, that's scary. Who knows how they've been treated? Who knows what kind of manipulation that they've been under? Yeah. So I think it's asking to me, it actually would feel unbelievable. It would feel trite, not as meaningful. If, like, the minute he came back, it was like, oh, welcome back, great.
Right.
Like, to me, it's more meaningful if they're like, wait a minute, where were you? Why did you do this to us?
Yeah.
And I think his mom is pretty immediately receptive, but the rest are a little not as much.
Yeah, and I think I've attributed some of that to, again, just in my own interpretation of they're also kind of in shock because they're like,
Yeah.
no, Simba died.
Yeah. Right.
You know, like, who are you? You know,
Yeah.
are you an imposter or what? You know,
Right, because he the last time they saw him, he was a little cub,
yeah, yeah,
so it makes sense. And I mean, who knows how long they'd even spent any time with him too. You
right,
can think about that because he was little, and lions aren't the same as humans as far as their
yeah,
gestation.
right.
And so they have to create a diversion, Timon and Pumbaa, and
Which is I think it's one of my favorites and one of many people's favorites. You
yeah,
know, that hula song. They
yeah.
sing.
What do you want me to do? Dress and drag and do the
Do the
hula?
hula. Hey!
Yeah.
So funny. And
Yeah.
Pumbaa's got the apple in his mouth and all that stuff. You know, I mean, it's so fun.
And I think that they were just ad-libbing, if I'm not mistaken, and that they said that at the
Oh,
D23
isn't
thing.
that interesting?
I'm not positive, but I think I remember that.
Yeah.
That
I think I heard something about that too, Rachel. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's funny. That's a fun sequence. I love that sequence too because as they're really starting to battle Scar, because it provides some comic relief that works, and then there's the big and almost like a little bit of a breather. You know, it's like, oh, we've had this very heavy part where Simba's returned home, and then there's going to be this war, you know, going on. I think it's funny too when Rafiki comes in and plays it like a Bruce Lee movie. You know, does that? That always makes me laugh. It made me laugh this time. I thought it was very funny. You know, does that kung fu stuff?
Yeah. Well, and it's really good. The whole to the hyenas said,
Yeah,
they called me Mr. Pig.
That's right, because they've got kind of like that taxi driver thing going on with that too. Right?
Yeah.
You talking to me?
And they get into their fight, and then Scar thinks he's won, and he tells Simba that he killed Mufasa.
Yeah.
And then he gets this extra burst of energy, and he attacks Scar, and that's when he says, go away, Scar, go away and never come back.
Yeah, just like Scar told him when he was little. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when he tries to blame it all on the hyenas. It was all the hyenas' fault, and the hyenas then say, "Well, what did we just hear?" And they end up attacking.
Yeah, attacking
Scar.
him and probably killing him. I mean, they show it off camera, which are just kind of in shadow, which I think again is a really good decision. I really like that, with what the writers did, the bevy of writers that we discussed, but that Simba didn't kill Scar. It was ultimately the hyenas, and Scar kind of killed himself. You know, I mean, it was just because that's I think that was an appropriate way to do that.
I agree. I think so too. And so then you end, of course, with a new circle of life.
New circle of life and a new baby, and a little reprise of the song. Yeah, I think that's a great scene. I love I love that, the wind's blowing and all the animals that are there again, and how all the main characters are standing there on Pride Rock. I just think that's really terrific.
It's great, really great. And that's the end of our movie. And I haven't seen them in a long time, but they have a midquel and they have a
The Lion King 1.5.
Yeah, to the movie. And I remember thinking both were okay of the animated direct-to-DVD sequels, and maybe they were released in theater. I can't remember. Some of these were, some weren't.
I don't believe they were, but don't quote me because I'm really anti-cheap cool. Many of the cheapos I haven't seen. I know I saw Lion King 1.5. Lion King 1.5, if I'm not mistaken, Rachel, was almost like it wasn't even a sequel. It was like stuff that we didn't see.
It's a midquel, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a midquel. It's like Timon and Pumbaa doing their shtick in between stuff that we in between scenes are already familiar with in the original film. And I think that it might, some of it might have worked, some of it didn't. I can't remember, but again, I saw it once, and once was enough, clearly. I don't think I ever saw, did they call it Lion King 2?
I think there is a Lion King 2.
Like Simba's Pride or something.
Mm-hmm.
And
then
they have a daughter, like their cub that gets christened is a little girl, Kimba. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's what's her name?
The world of these sequels, in my memory at least, it's one of the better.
Oh, good.
Of these things, I I actually plan to try to rewatch these. Their daughter named Kiara.
Yeah, Kiara. Something like that. That's right.
And they actually have also a series called The Lion Guard, which wasn't half bad for little kids. It was pretty well done. The
Lion Guard. Whose child or cub is that little lion? Is it Kiara's kid?
I think it's actually Kiara's kid. I think.
Son, okay.
Again, going back a couple of years since I've seen it. But it was actually pretty well done. They tried. And in The Lion King 2, I guess it's sort of loosely based on Romeo and Juliet kind of a thing.
Oh, that's right. I vaguely remember, because it's like Scar had a son, right?
Yeah,
or something that we never met. But he's not bad like his dad, but he's still Scar's son, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that. Yeah, you are brave and strong to be willing to rewatch those prequels. I kind of feel like they don't even exist. I mean, I know that they do, but I just I will not watch. I have nothing to do with these. I just thought they were such a travesty.
Yeah, most of them really are. But yeah, and then of course you had the Broadway musical, it was really interesting because they were trying to go away from the Broadway musical, but then they end up coming back to it. In writing it, they were trying to go away from the Broadway musical, and then in this sort of the evolution of things, they end up going back, and you have Julie Taymor and her brilliant creative vision for the Broadway musical.
That is such a cool show. I love that show too, and it's amazing. I mean, I can't remember the stats, Rachel, but last I heard, I mean, it's one of the longest running shows on Broadway right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. And it plays worldwide.
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't know how many touring companies they've got. They've got a bunch. You know? People love it.
It's really wonderful.
It is.
It's just a complete creative artistic vision.
Yeah.
And I really love it. So we have some comments on Twitter.
Oh, yay.
Yes, all about The Lion King. So let me read some of those. We have Animated Antic says, one of the greatest animated movies ever made. The story is fantastic. Animation is top notch. The characters are fun, and the songs are unforgettable. It really is a classic. And I was surprised how kind of all over the place these comments were. It's interesting. So the Love Pirate, he says, somewhat overrated, but still pretty great. Really impressive and beautiful animation. But I think the first half is better than the second. The stage version is better than the film, in part because the stage version embraces being a musical better than the film does. We have Richard Southworth. He says, it has some of the best animation and music of any Disney film. I had to grow into it somewhat as a kid. First time I saw it in the cinema, I think I found the experience a bit overwhelming. Then Michelle Benson says, nothing negative to say about this film. It's still perfect in my eyes. It has one of the best opening scenes in film history. Randomly, my favorite song is the Broadway version of He Lives in You. Yeah. I prefer it over the whole original soundtrack. We have Ronald Smith says it's one of the best Disney films, from the score, animation, voice acting. It's just amazing. Its only flaws were Simba, Scar's fall after he became king, Sin as a return, and I really wished they would have dug deeper on why Scar hated Mufasa. Did he ever love his brother? Kurt Manwaring, he says that's looking back quite a ways. I remember being disappointed at the time in the immediate aftermath of Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast, but then impressed as a string of mediocre films followed. Now I think of it as a deserving classic. A couple others, Mams the Rabbit, he says, not my cup of tea. Not a bad movie by any means, just a movie that I don't really care about. And one more is from Mon Jory. He says, in the past, I used to think it was very overrated, but after watching it multiple times on Freeform, I've come to see the first half as really grand and spectacular. As for the second half, it's decent, but it pales in comparison to the first half. So there you are. There you go.
Interesting. Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
When I did my last ranking of the Disney canon, I had Lion King at number 10.
Okay.
Yeah, I have Dumbo at 11, and I have Sleeping Beauty at 9. So
excellent. All right.
My last ranking, so it made my top 10.
Yeah, and for me, it's just in that outstanding category, just like it is one of the all-time greats. And honestly, for me, Rachel, this is one of those films. I think it just it gets better for me over time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I liked it to begin with, but now I really like it. And again, I really, really enjoyed this last watch.
Yeah,
a lot.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's just got it all as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So let's pick out what we're going to talk about next month.
Okay, it's very exciting.
I know, it's really good. So.
See what the random number generator is going to pick for us. So it's like this, the claw.
Okay, it's pick number 35, which is Hercules.
Hercules. All right.
Yeah, so the fear of we're never going to get a packaged film. It's never going to happen. So we have 35, which I'm really excited about. That's going to be fun. It's a very weird entry in the Disney canon for a lot of reasons. So I'm excited to
rewatch it. I'm excited to revisit. And if I'm not mistaken, I thought I read that Disney's developing a Broadway production of Hercules.
Yeah, I remember hearing that too.
Like they just recently did some casting, I think, for it. I don't know where they're doing their out-of-town tryout or anything, but anyway.
And
verify that.
It's you got Gerald Scarfa's involvement. You have Alan Menken going all gospel on us. I mean, it's a really weird movie, but I really enjoy it. You got comic book aesthetic. You've got Greek aesthetic. You've got it's just crazy, but I really enjoy it. So that's going to be fun. We will talk about Hercules in August.
Outstanding.
Great. Well, let us know your thoughts about The Lion King in the comment section or on Twitter. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And so I will be seeing The Lion King, the new version soon. I'll have reviews, content on that on my channel. So definitely look for that. And thanks so much, Stanford. This is so much fun. And where can people find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Stanford Clark. And I also have a movie blog and podcast, which is at moviespastandpresent.com.
Yes, and you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, and on iTunes and YouTube. If you're listening on iTunes, if you can give us your ratings and reviews, we really appreciate it. If you're listening on YouTube, you can give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate that as well. We also have an Anchor cast for just the Talking Disney. If you want to look at that, I'll have all that information in the description section. And you can also support the podcast via our Patreon, where we have lots of fun discussions on our Facebook group, and we give exclusive extras and giveaways and all kinds of fun stuff. So please check that out. Only a few dollars a month could really help us out and be able to do more and have more fun. So please take a look at that. And we have our Animation Junkie shirts. So there's lots of fun stuff going on. And that's all in the description section. So thank you so much. And we will talk next month about Hercules.
Hey, thanks. Bye.
Bye.